Hi, my name is Dana Geibel, and this is my story of how God saved me and changed my life. I'm 46 years old, and I grew up in Southern California. I grew up in Laverne, which is a nice little city about 35 minutes east of Los Angeles. My parents are the children of Mexican immigrants. They worked very hard when they were growing up, and they worked hard to provide me and my brother and my sister with a very comfortable life. If we had an interest in something like sports or art classes or some type of activity, they would sign us up and make that happen for us. They encouraged us to do well in school and work hard for that. I didn't have to work very hard in school because it came pretty easy to me. I was fairly compliant, and also I read a lot of books, so I guess that helped. We went to Catholic church when I was growing up. I would go to Mass on Sunday and a midweek catechism class. I was baptized as an infant. I did my first Holy Communion in about second grade. My mom had let me design my dress, and then she had a seamstress make it for the communion. And I was so excited about that dress. I think that was the main thing I was excited about in terms of my first Holy Communion. And then when I was growing up, I watched a lot of TV and movies. In junior high, I had friends who went to the evangelical Protestant churches, and I started going with them to the youth groups. I found it very fun to go to those youth groups. They were a lot more interesting to me than the Catholic Mass. I would listen to the teaching, and I went to the winter camps and summer camps, and I had asked my mom to buy me a Bible. So I had this really nice Precious Moments Bible with those big-headed little children as inside the Bible. And then it had a really nice red leather cover, and I started reading it a little bit. And so when I was growing up, I got a perspective of like the Catholic approach to God and the Protestant approach to God. But by the time I hit high school, I really wasn't interested in either the Catholic or the Protestant approach. I had been reading different things, and I was drawn to more of a New Age way of thinking about God. I was interested in past lives and reincarnation and hypnosis. And over those high school years, I started trying to do a self-hypnosis and trying to get my soul out of my body. I would also do hypnosis sessions with my friends. We would try to see what was in their past lives so that we could, I guess, gain some knowledge or something like that. And I thought of God more as this being, this like state of mind, not judgmental. I rejected the idea of hell. And that's where I was at with my view of God. This caused a conflict with my parents because in about ninth grade, I was expected to do the Catholic confirmation sacrament. And that's when, as a Catholic, you're saying, I am really taking on this faith for myself. This is me deciding to join with the Catholic Church. And so by that time, I was not interested in being a Catholic, and I argued with my mom. I told her, why would I do this? I don't believe in Jesus. I don't believe in the Bible. So why are you making me do this? And she still wanted me to do it. It was more for our Mexican heritage, more of a cultural thing. And I could see that now, like that's where she was coming from. We didn't talk much about the Catholic faith, at home, or I don't think we prayed together or anything like that, but it was still important to her in terms of where we had come from culturally. So I didn't win that argument, and I did the confirmation. I had a very bad attitude about it. I was not reverent. I found that there was a name on the list of saints' names that I could pick from, because you're supposed to pick a saint's name that you emulate and admire. And I picked the name Margarita just because it was the same name as an alcoholic beverage. So after I did that confirmation, I was not forced to go to Mass very much after that. I think my parents had just been worn out with all the negativity from me and my brother. And so they actually didn't make my sister do the confirmation process. And in high school, I started off as on the pre-college track, like I was in the honors program, and there was an expectation to do this program, and then you could apply to any university you wanted. So over the years, though, I was not very interested in applying to any university. I just didn't see the point in it, and I dropped out. As every year I dropped out more and more of these classes. And so by the time I was in my senior year, I was just doing the bare minimum of what I had to do to graduate. And I was fine with that. So I had left behind this Christian understanding of living, and I left behind the really academic understanding of approaching life. And so what I was really into was humor. That was my main interest, and making myself laugh, making my friends laugh. I gravitated towards people who had a very good sense of humor, like very quick-witted, and that was just a main focus for me. I put a lot of time into it. Like, my friends and I, we'd focus on doing a lot of like weird pranks because it would make us laugh. Like, it wasn't like we were trying to make other people laugh. It was just entertaining to us. And so I would spend so much time doing these things. Like, my friend and I would make all these absurd fake election signs when the school elections for ASB would come up, and we'd go really early to campus, and I'd bring my dad's ladder, and we'd go and try to like hang up these signs everywhere. And it would just make us laugh to see the confused or shocked or amused responses from our classmates during the day. We would help her grandma with the laundry, and she would take her grandma's undergarments, and then we would take those and hang them from trees randomly on campus. And same thing, just seeing all the range of responses from people that would make us laugh. We would act like we were in a fist fight off campus, and just on and on. It was always these silly or weird things. And, you know, when I look at YouTube today, I think if YouTube had existed back then, I would have been all over that, like filming these things. And I don't have a problem with, humor necessarily, or making, finding things to laugh about. But I just know the way I was doing it, it was such an outsized portion of my time. It was just overdone. And, over time, the jokes would turn mean, or like we had so many people one time. We had made all these fake flyers, and we directed all these unknowing people to this party that a girl was having who my friend didn't like, and she had heard about her birthday. And, we had tons of people crash this party, and that wasn't nice. And a lot of the things I did too, like the entertainment element for me was because I was confusing other people and messing with them. And just, that was like my main concern though, was how it amused me. And so it wasn't very nice. And looking back, I think too, like, wow, I could have done a lot of good things with my time instead of that. Like, I could have done a lot of acts of service or just kindness, but I didn't. I spent a lot of time watching movies and TV, and I was really drawn to funny content, whether it was like late night talk shows, Saturday Night Live, David Letterman. During the daytime talk shows, I was drawn to these trashy talk shows. Richard Bay, Jerry Springer, Montel Williams, people like that. And those would become the basis of jokes I would make and the ways I would talk. And if you're not familiar with those shows, like during the 90s, they showed like the trashiest content, like the worst social situations. Like the show would be used to reveal that someone was cheating on their partner with their brother, or they would try to do a reveal of who was the father of the child. And, it's these really awful situations, but they were turned into entertainment. And that's what I filled my mind with. I was also, I adopted some very profane ways of talking too, because that made me laugh as well. Like having these really awful phrases that was funny to me. I also had this real interest in drugs and alcohol. My family had not had a problem with drugs and alcohol that when I was growing up, but it was just something I was really drawn to. Like I was interested in that, and I don't feel like I was peer pressured at all. The first time I drank a beer, it was all by myself. I had taken one from my family's refrigerator. My parents were not heavy drinkers or anything, but we did have alcohol. And so I drank that in the backyard all by myself. I think it took 2 different times trying to do that, because the first time it was so gross, I threw it out. But the second time, I think I was able to drink the whole thing. And after that, I felt pretty happy with myself. Like, okay, I'm going to go do this with other people now. And that was the same situation with me and smoking pot. I did it by myself first at home, and then I went on to do that with other people. And so with alcohol becoming part of my life, my actions just got really reckless. Like, because I was combining that with this desire to be entertained and do funny, weird things. And so there were a lot of dangerous situations that I was putting myself into. And when I look back, like I don't know why I was never stopped or woken up by these situations, because I guess I just wasn't thinking. I had times, or one time where we almost got in a bad situation on the freeway because a friend of mine was driving. We were driving home drunk. All of us were drunk, and we were about to miss this exit that we needed to take to get onto the next freeway. And so she just went across a few lanes of traffic too fast and hit gravel and lost control of the car. And we spun around, and thankfully, thank God, we didn't hit anybody, but we were facing oncoming traffic, and she was able to turn the car around, get back the right way, and go down on the freeway that we needed to. And with that occasion, I knew that we almost, we just missed getting in an accident. But my response was like, oh, like I just thought it was funny. Like we almost died, ha ha ha. And I was laughing, and nothing changed. And I had a lot of situations like that. And the situations we were pursuing were just, not safe. Like crashing parties that we didn't know anybody, and just getting into bad situations was part of my life. I was really also into art and music. Art was one of the classes that I really did enjoy in high school. And I was really into alternative, college radio, punk type music. I had really left behind Christian morality and adopted probably just a secular morality. I do think that was probably in part due to all the media I was taking in and books I was reading and movies and TV. It's not like there's much content out there that promotes chastity or anything like that. So to me, it's not surprising that I went into premarital sex, fornication, and I didn't feel bad about it at the time. It seemed very normal to me and like a mature decision on my part. Over time, though, I saw how that behavior did become very degraded. Something that was initially for me reserved for a committed relationship, at least, even though I wasn't waiting for marriage or anything, at least I thought, okay, well, just do that in a committed relationship. After that relationship ended, I went on to go do things, do that with other people who I didn't have a commitment to, and eventually people who I wasn't even that interested in. It was almost like that part of my life, sexual immorality, like was almost like another form of entertainment. It was something to do that was fun and interesting, and I think that is sad because that really, it lost a lot of the specialness that I think it should have. And so I didn't have a lot of goals or things like that. When I graduated high school, I thought maybe I would join a different band. I had been a drummer in a garage / punk band when I was in high school, but then that ended. I got in trouble with my parents, and so that they took that privilege away. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll join another band. Maybe I'll do art. But I didn't have a lot of set goals. When I graduated, though, my parents told me that I needed to either work full-time or go to community college and work part-time while I was living at their house. So I did pick the community college option. And at this time, college was positive for me in that I had this renewed interest in learning. I liked how I could take my own, how I could make my own choices with classes. So if I had to fulfill a history requirement, I liked that I could take the feminist version of history. And I liked how I could take several art classes because that was my intended major. And so I did become an engaged student. I would read whatever we were assigned and I would try to do a good job. So that became positive for me. And that was a contrast to my attitude towards high school. I did start having more periods of like really dark moods during this time. And that had been something that was part of my high school experience too, because while I was pursuing like this crazy fun, these weird jokes and partying, on the flip side, I would have these really severe lows. And maybe that was an effect of just alcohol, like a side effect, but I'd have these very dark periods where I just got so sad, so hopeless, and I'd listen to sad music and that would just make it worse. And I did start having periods of some beginnings of like self-harm, whether it was scratching myself or like cutting my hair. Like one time I cut most of my hair off, and it wasn't because I was trying to just get a new hairdo. Like I was sad and taking out my sadness like that. I had also, one time I was very depressed and I just thought, I don't want to be around this weekend in terms of being awake. And for some reason I took so much Tylenol, like 20 something Tylenol with alcohol and just by myself. And I thought, for some irrational reason, I thought, this will just make me sleep all weekend. I just want to sleep all weekend. But I don't know where I got that idea. Probably from like Satan, because it doesn't even make sense. And then thankfully, I think because of all the alcohol I took, or maybe the alcohol was old, it was like a liqueur. Like I just puked everything up, just puked the whole day. And so later I learned that some people die from liver damage due to too much Tylenol. And so I'm very grateful that I wasn't harmed through that. But that was just during one of my bad moods. And so when I look back, I think, well, maybe just all the behaviors I was doing and the new age, weird spiritual things I was experimenting with, like that could have all combined. Yeah, I was far from God. And so that could have been one reason for those really low moods. And also a lot of my behaviors I was able to do those because I would lie so much. And so lying to my parents so much and having a really, really not great relationship a lot of the time, that could have been contributing to these dark, depressed feelings I had too. And so that's where I was at. I, wasn't all negative, but I had a lot of not great things going for me. And as I went on, I do think things got worse. The amount of drinking I did got to be more, and the reckless behavior too. When I met Jeff, who's my husband now, when I met him at community college, that was a big change for me. That really did end up changing the trajectory of my life. And we met in an art class. He was also an art major, and all of the art majors have to take these figure drawing classes. And that's basically where there's a nude model in class, and they're doing different poses, and you're required to do different drawings of them at differing lengths of time, like 1 minute, 2 minute, 5 minute drawings. And this was very normal to me by that time because I had taken those types of classes in high school. But looking back, I just think, wow, that's really weird that we were in those classes. But that's where I met Jeff. And almost immediately, I felt very comfortable with him. I really enjoyed talking to him. I think the first time we met, we were talking, and then we went to this art gallery together right outside the classroom, and looking at the art and talking, I just felt so comfortable, like that this felt right. And he was on a very different path at that time. He had been recently very enthusiastic about Jesus, and he was making changes in his life to line up with what he saw of Bible teaching. He would take his big fat Bible with him around campus, and he would try to talk to everybody. If somebody was an atheist, he would try to get them to see why they should at least be an agnostic. And if someone was an agnostic, he would try to get them to seriously consider the claims of Jesus. And he was inviting people to church and really wanted to spread the gospel as he understood it. And I noticed this, and it wasn't like I was interested in those types of conversations. And he would try to talk to me about those things, but I just wasn't interested. But we had other interesting conversations. And as time went on, I thought, oh, this class is going to end, and then I might not see him very much anymore. And I wanted to keep seeing him. So I thought, okay, I need to start trying to spend time with him outside of class. And so I had this little plan that I would invite him to go eat French fries with me at the local Wendy's. And so I was so nervous about that. And he didn't have any idea of this plan of mine. But before Thanksgiving break, I had said that very casually, like, I think I'm going to go get fries. I'm feeling hungry. Do you want to go with me? And he was like, sure. Like, he just didn't have something to do. And so we went to Wendy's, and we ended up having a whole meal there together. And that picture was just such a picture of like where we were at, and the different places that we were at in our lives at that time. So when we were there, like, I was wearing my punk looking outfit, like with my dyed hair and all my makeup, heavy makeup and chains and my boots and all that, and looking, I didn't look like I lived on the street or anything. Like I was a very well taken care of girl, but that was the look I had. And he's just very plain and like jeans and just a t-shirt, and not trying to look edgy or cool or anything. And during our conversation, I had continued on in this crude, or having some crude mannerisms, and when I would have to burp, I would just burp. And I thought a burp was coming, and I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to burp and continue on talking. And the burp really took me by surprise, because when it came out, it was this huge, croaky, loud burp that just like rang out through the whole restaurant. And it stopped the restaurant, and everybody swiveled their heads to look at, like, who did that? And I didn't expect that, but at the same time, I wasn't super embarrassed. Like, I just went on eating my food and talking. And Jeff remembers this older couple was sitting off to the side of us, and they looked over at him, this man and a wife, and they just like shook their heads slowly, like looked like they were very disappointed. and in Jeff's mind, he's thinking, well, wait, they're associating me with this girl. I don't even barely know this girl. Like, she's not with me. And so during the course of that conversation, like, I started sharing with Jeff about what I had done that weekend. And I was talking about how my friends and I had went to this club and we had been drinking somehow. And because even though I wasn't underage, there were ways to get alcohol. And then we wanted to go to this other party. And so I drove to the next thing, but then I must have ran a yellow light or took it too late. And so I got pulled over. And when the officer pulled me over, I failed the breathalyzer test. And I was only 19, so it was obviously illegal to be drinking at all and driving. And so I was telling Jeff, though, how I just started lying and making up this whole scenario to him, like crying, saying, I went to this club and I thought it was just going to be cowboy night, but yet everyone was pressuring me to drink, and I didn't realize, blah, blah, blah. I was just lying, making it seem like it was the first time I had done this. And this poor officer believed me, and he was just going to go take me inside to talk to my parents because I was very close to my house, actually. But then I cried again on the way when he was about to do that. Like he had drove us in the car to my house, and I just crying and laying on this whole story. And eventually that officer just let me go walk in and go home. I guess he felt satisfied that, well, I was home and I had made him believe that I was obviously never going to do this again because I'd never done that before. And so I went from that situation with no consequences. And Jeff was just shocked to hear this, like shocked and also kind of angry because he's recalling all his police experiences and nobody ever would let him get off of anything. Like it would, even just a broken tail light, like he remembers getting no mercy really. And he just couldn't believe it. And I was like, yeah, well, that's what happened. And he felt very concerned for me because he thought, this girl's going to kill somebody or kill herself. Like that recklessness was really coming through to him. And he was concerned. We started spending more time together because we did enjoy each other's company. And then I had it in my mind. I had this whole thing in my mind that wasn't true, because on Jeff's end, he was very concerned for me. He's trying to sometimes witness to me, but it doesn't really go anywhere. It's like these little rocks that get thrown on my head that just bounce off. Like they don't go anywhere because I'm not interested in talking about Jesus. Like I don't believe in what he's sharing and I just don't care. And so for him, some of these times we'd spend together would feel very empty because the most meaningful thing in his life was talking with people about Jesus. And I didn't want to talk about Jesus, but he still did like my personality. And in my mind, I'm thinking, wow, like, this guy must like me. and I thought, the way I was behaving physically with other people at the time, I thought, I don't even like some of these people in that way, really. And like, wow, it'd be so much better to be physical with Jeff because I like him. And I thought, well, he's probably going to want me to be his girlfriend. He's probably going to want a commitment. And I wasn't really interested in that. But then I thought, well, if that's the way it has to be, okay, fine. Because he's a Christian. I could see him having some desire for commitment. I was so like out of touch with reality. Like that was not what was going on in Jeff's mind, but it was what I thought was happening. And so I just thought, okay, well, he just needs to have some encouragement because he's probably shy or something. Or scared. And so after lunch together one day, I was in his car and I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to be very direct with him. And so I said, okay, well, you can kiss me now. And he was so surprised. He startled and jumped back a little bit in his seat. And he's like, what? And I said, you could kiss me now. It's okay. I just want to let you know it's okay with me. And he was shocked and said, who said anything about kissing? And I just said, I thought I'd just let you know. And he's like, okay, Dana, like, first of all, like, I'm not really interested in that, doing that with you. But second, even if I really was, he said, I wouldn't do that with you because that would be wrong because you're a non-believer. And that response totally surprised me. I asked him, like, what are you talking about? And he showed me the verse in the Bible that talked about not being unequally yoked with non-believers. And he said, so, you're a non-believer, and so I wouldn't do that. And that really disgusted me as an answer, I kicked his dashboard, not super hard, but a little bit. And I just said, like, you are so stupid. Like, this is so stupid. Like, you're believing this little book. And because just because your book says you can't date someone, outside of your faith, like, you're not going to do it. And he's like, yeah. And I just couldn't believe that, because I stretched out my arms and I showed him, like, here's like all the people in the world, Jeff. And here's all the people who believe like you do. And I made this gesture to like a very small portion of that. And I said, so you're saying, like, if you meet someone you really like and really love, but they're not in this little group, like, you're not going to have a relationship with them because of what your little book says? And he's like, yeah, that's the idea. And I said, like, you're never going to get a wife. Like, I didn't like so many people. And so, like, to imagine limiting myself, I just couldn't see that. And so I thought, that was just dumb. And Jeff was very, like, faithful, though. He said, well, I think God's going to provide me with a wife. And I think he might have said, even if he doesn't, that's okay. And I just was so stunned. And that was not the response I expected. Out of all my possible ideas of what he could have said, that was not it. And so we left that encounter, and he was a little worried that maybe I'd never talk to him again because I seemed so mad. But I think that was so important that he did that. And so good, because it was surprising to me, but it actually really changed my perspective of him, because I didn't see him any longer as somebody who kind of wanted to do these sinful things, but maybe just didn't have the chance to. Like, he had standards, and maybe those seem like fairly low standards to some people, that he's waiting for a Christian girlfriend. But like, that seemed very unusual to me at the time, because I wasn't living out much standards, in that area. And it was surprising. And I gained some respect for him. And I think him also making that clear line of, like, you're not okay, Dana. Like, you're not okay. That was good. And after that, I did start going to church with him. He had invited me before, but I hadn't really been interested. And I wasn't trying to act like I was becoming a Christian or anything like that. But I do think, seeing that level of integrity, I respected him, and I began going. It wasn't like during the sermons or anything that I was moved. It was an evangelical megachurch that he went to, and they try to make things very engaging. Like, they change the lyrics to some popular rock songs to make them praise songs. And some people would think that's cheesy, and some people would think that's cool, but that's what they did. And the sermons were often trying to get young people, like college-age teenagers, to repent of their sins and follow Jesus. It was often there would be an altar call, and it's just trying to get people to change their mind. And a lot of people would go to this church. And so that's where I went, and I never felt really moved by the sermons, but the people there were very nice, and I would clean up my language when I was around them. I wasn't trying to offend anybody. And so that became part of what I did. But at the same time, I was also mostly doing things with my friends and pursuing different parties and things like that. And so that semester ended, and I went to Spain for a study abroad time. And that's a time where I just went into a lot of debauchery. Spain was so like an open door for me to do a lot of the behaviors that I had been somewhat restrained from while I was in my family's home, because they didn't support me doing drugs or alcohol. But in Spain, I was living with families who were host families who were just doing it like a job. And so they weren't really putting a lot of rules on us. And also, the drinking age in Spain was lower. I think it was 16. So I was so excited about that, to be able to openly drink alcohol. I immediately made friends there who were interested in similar things. And that pattern of being really reckless just continued on, getting into situations where we're with people we barely know and things like that. My friends would buy ecstasy at the clubs, and I started doing ecstasy often. It just made me really happy. It was a popular drug at the dance clubs at the time, and doing that with alcohol, I just definitely started going more into darkness. And one thing I did want to add that I forgot to add is that during the time before I went to Spain, Jeff's friends were praying for me, and he was praying for me. So even though his witnessing attempts didn't really go anywhere, he was praying for me. And I even saw that on their refrigerator at his house. Him and his brother would write down the names of people who they knew that they were praying for to get saved. And my name was on there several times, spelled wrong, different times. And so I saw that and I thought, oh, like, okay, like that's cute. Like they think I'm going to hell. Okay, but it seems sweet at the same time. And so I think Jeff was still praying for me while I was in Spain. And for me during this time, I had some indicators that I was on the wrong path that showed up. I remember one time walking home I was walking to class, and I was walking down this street, and it's very picturesque. Like there's cobblestones and old buildings in the city that we were in. And I remember looking at everything and looking at things in the sunshine and the people with their children and the bakery, and just I was thinking about how different it looked compared to when I'd be down the same street at night, and the club that I would go to was all closed up in the daytime, but at night, obviously it's open. And I remember feeling like that I was bad. Like I thought, but it wasn't like, oh, I feel bad about being bad. It was exciting to me. And I just thought, oh, like being good must be so boring. Like I just couldn't even imagine why that'd be interesting. And I just thought, like, I like doing bad things. It's fun. And it was a contrast to me in my mind. We had been able to go visit other places on the weekends and things like that. And so once I was in Lisbon, and a friend of mine was with me, and we met this really nice married couple. And they were taking such pride in showing us around the city and telling us about the historical sites. And they were very knowledgeable and friendly. And my friend and I enjoyed that. But the main reason that we wanted to or what we really wanted to do that night was go to this one club where we had planned to go and do drugs. And so we asked them, okay, well, can you take us to this place? This is where we really want to go. And so they walked us over there. And as we were getting in line and saying goodbye to them, the man looked very just serious. And he looked at us, and he looked at the place we were going into, and he said, that place is evil. You shouldn't go in there. And I was taken aback because I was surprised that he said that. And he was very simple about that. I mean, he wasn't trying to convince us to leave. And I remember being surprised, like, oh, like he's so sure of that. Huh. Well, I wonder why he said that. And later, looking back, I realized, yeah, he was probably right. That place was evil and we shouldn't have gone in there. But we, continued on in there and didn't listen to him. While I was there, I had two experiences that I think really changed my heart towards God. I had been very interested in doing drugs in Amsterdam. My friends and I planned a trip there, and that was a main draw for me. I wasn't so interested in going to the Anne Frank house, even though we did that, but I really had wanted to do shrooms. And there you can just buy it, and it's legal to buy it from a store. And so when my friends and I did that, my experience started going really bad. Like I had probably taken in too much, and I was seeing so many just pure evil things, like evil, nasty things on the television. My friends started to look very evil, and just that feeling of evil was so strong. And I couldn't handle being around people. So I just walked away, and I was walking all along the hotel, and things just started getting darker and more evil in my mind. I remember starting to be scared, like maybe I had really messed up my mind with these drugs. And I wondered, maybe I'm not really walking through this hotel right now. Like maybe I'm really passed out, like in a coma or something. And maybe they had to call my mom to go identify me, or like maybe something's wrong with me and I just don't even know because I'm so in my mind. Or maybe I'm a homeless crazy lady right now who's just been in this hotel, but it's really been 40 years that have passed and I'm just screaming on the street. And well, I just started getting very scared, and I would count the door numbers on the doors because that predictability gave my mind a sense of comfort. So because they were in order, like 38, 40, 42, 108, 110, 112, like as I was walking around, the counting really helped me to feel like I wasn't completely crazy. And as I kept wondering, I thought, maybe I'm dead. Like maybe I overdosed or something, and maybe I'm dead, and maybe this is hell. Like maybe hell is just going through this hotel and things are just going to get worse and worse and feel more and more evil. And I had this thought that came, like it felt like it was outside of me, and it was like, maybe I deserve it. Like maybe if this is hell, you probably deserve it, Dana. And that was so different for me because I hadn't felt like that in a really, really long time. Like maybe in junior high, I wondered about deserving hell, but for so long I hadn't even believed in hell. But that thought of like, I probably do deserve it was really different for me. But I came out of that drug experience and with no real lasting effects, and I just wanted to do shrooms again because I wanted a better experience. And so we did that again together in Amsterdam, and we were staying at another hostel this time and going around to a club. And that experience was very bad for me again. It was just very evil and not good. And I ended up back at the hostel with my friends, and I was laying in bed, and I got very scared again because I wanted to sit up, but I couldn't. Like I couldn't move my body. And I started getting very scared at this point because I thought, oh, great. Like, what if I did it? Like, what if I messed up? Like my brain and my body aren't working and these drugs might have messed me up. And I was feeling very sad about that and wondering maybe this is it. And my mind felt very black and dark, and I started talking to God in my mind, and I was saying, God, like I'm so sorry. Like I am so sorry. I think I messed up my body, and if you could help me get out of this, I really need help. And I was talking with God in my mind, and I heard, like that he will I'll forgive you, Dana. I will forgive you, but you need to change, and how I needed to honor his son. And I was like, oh yes, I will live for Jesus. If you just help me get out of this. And, again, I felt so sorry. Like I was so aware that I had this healthy mind and body, and I just messed it up. And then after that, I was able to sit up, and I was so happy. Like, wow, like everything works. And then I remembered about what I had told God I would do. And I went to my friends, and I had some drugs in my pocket, and I pulled them out and put them on the table. And I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to live for Jesus. And I don't think they really had a response. Like maybe it was like, okay, whatever, Dana. Like I had been such a not great companion at the time, doing all sorts of probably weird things. And, or maybe they were in a strange state of mind as well. I don't know. But, I went back to bed, and however, having those experiences, I do think my heart was changed. I do think having a sense of conviction and thinking more about repenting was good, but I didn't stick with that repentance. Like, so it wasn't completely serious. Like I did go back into drinking and going to the clubs again, but I do think something changed in my heart. And when I came home from Spain, when the semester was over, I went into a deep period of depression. I think that is similar to what I had had before with that darkness and depression. I mean, that wasn't new to me, but the severity and the length of this time was new, and it was very bad. I had so many nights where I'd go to sleep at night and I would be so glad that I was able to go to sleep because I just didn't want to be aware. And I was hopeful, like, okay, maybe in the morning I'll wake up and I won't feel so bad. Maybe I'll feel like my old self again. And I would be so disappointed in the morning when I would wake up and that same sense of deadness and lack of interest in anything that was still there. And I was like, oh man. And like nothing was really funny. And I was very comfortable around Jeff because I guess I didn't feel like I needed to entertain him. Like if I wasn't making him laugh, like he seemed okay with that, with me just like sitting there sometimes like a lump. And I tried to do some things to help. Like I thought, okay, like serving other people is supposed to help. So I became a tutor, a volunteer tutor, and it was a very hard period. But also during that time, like I think what did happen with me in Spain had some reality to it because I started having questions for the first time, like a Bible study that my friend led. I was asking questions like, okay, so wait, so Saul became Paul, and Paul wrote this letter, like some very basic questions. And Jeff gave me some books that had things about Christianity and the Bible and the ways it was put together. And then I read in one of the books, they had the passage from C.S. Lewis, and that really got me thinking because I, at that time, would say that Jesus was good, but he wasn't the only way to God. And I still had some of these New Age beliefs and things like that. And so that's why I would say I wasn't saying he was horrible or anything. But then reading that passage from C.S. Lewis where he argues that like you can't just say he's good and stay there because he said some very radical things about himself, about him being the Son of God and the only way to God, and like if you don't honor him, God's not gonna accept you. And he made very, very demanding claims. And so if he said those things and they aren't true, and he knew they weren't true about himself, well, he's a liar. And we don't call liars good. Or if he said those things and he believed them, yet they're not true, he's not the only way to God, then he's a lunatic. And if that's not the case, well, then if he said those things and they're true, then he's the Lord and you need to follow him. And that really challenged me because I would think, well, I don't think what he said was true, but I don't think he's a liar and I don't think he's crazy. And so it just kept going back to, okay, he's probably Lord. And that was very challenging for me because I knew that if I was going to say he's Lord, then I should follow him. And I knew that if I should follow him, then I have to give up a lot of things. The mega church that I attended with Jeff at the time, they weren't preaching a super, super demanding call of obedience or anything like that. But they did at least teach you have to stop partying. You can't sleep around. You can't or sleep with anybody who's not your spouse. You can't do a lot of these bad things. You need to repent from some basic things. And so that was pretty clear to me. And I think I also would have intuitively known that too. If you're a Christian, you have to behave like one, basically. And so that was very hard though, because when I would think about drugs or alcohol or fornication or the crude way I would talk, those were often the most fun times I had in my life. My happiest memories involve those things. I didn't have a lot outside of that. And so, but then I'd compare it to okay, well, this might be the truth though. This might be the truth. And so that was a very weighty thing. Like I would just go back and forth, like which one do I want? Like these behaviors or truth and God? And even though it was difficult for me and my heart wasn't in like a place that I just wanted a new life, like I decided though, I do need to stop doing these things. And like if I follow Jesus, I can't do these things anymore. And so I made that commitment. And when I was reading one of the apologetics books, they had this little sinner's prayer section about saying, being sorry for your sins and asking God to forgive you. And I said that prayer by myself in the book. I think I said it out loud, but just by myself. And then I closed the book. And it's very similar to when I first drank beer or smoked pot. It was something I did by myself first. And then I decided to pray with someone else. I told my friend who had been praying for me about me, wanting to be a Christian. And I think I told her I prayed the prayer already, but she, wanted me to pray with someone else too. And she was so excited for me, oh, yay. Cause that was like her answer to prayer, for me to change. And so we did that with a pastor from the church, I think. And she gave me a Bible, or maybe I just prayed with her. That actually is kind of fuzzy in my memory. And so I decided I was going to get baptized. And I had this funny feeling, though, about telling Jeff. Like, I knew he had been praying for me, and I knew that was the right thing to do. But part of me didn't want to tell him, or I felt kind of embarrassed, almost like, okay, yeah, I'm admitting I was wrong and stupid or something. But obviously, he was very happy for me. And so I think he and his brother baptized me. The church would have these times of baptisms one after another because so many people were getting baptized. And that started a whole new chapter of life for me. I went to church as often as they had a young adult geared meeting. And I wanted to learn. I think God did truly take me out of the life I was living, and I started having a desire for better things. And so that was really good. And I wanted to learn as much as I could. I would listen to Christian radio a lot of sermons. And now looking back, I don't agree with the entire approach that some of those pastors took, but I was really blessed by all the information they gave and just getting some more knowledge about the Bible, different books, the Jewish tradition, and just learning more about what was said in the Bible. That was really good. And I had a time once too where one of the pastors was just reading about love, 1 Corinthians about love and the attributes of love. And when he got to the part about love, not keeping a record of wrongs, that was really meaningful to me because I had some things that I had been bitter about in my family. And just to realize, okay, that's keeping a record of wrongs. I need to forgive. And just forgiving right then and there, it was a forgiveness in my heart. And that was really good. So just things like that just happened through listening to the radio. And I deepened my relationships with the people who I had met at church. And that was really good. And I was just on a trajectory of growing. There were some things that were difficult too, because I had this commitment to leave drinking and drugs, but I was really weak in that area. And so even after getting baptized, I drank a couple times, and I think I smoked pot once after that. And the difference was, it wasn't something I was super happy about when I was doing it. And then I felt really bad after. And just in the end, I concluded, I can't be in those environments where people are doing that to have fun. I just couldn't. It was just too much for me, and it was too much of a temptation. And I had to just not be around that for my own success in sobriety. And thankfully, over the years, God really did change that in me. I got to the point where I didn't have that passion anymore in me, or that desire to just get really drunk. And I remember once I was with a friend, and for some reason she had wanted to go to a bar to meet somebody or something. And I looked at the wall and there was all this alcohol like lined up, and it was really beautiful looking, all the bottles. And I looked at it and I thought, wow, like I didn't feel anything. And that line from a movie came up that you have no power over me. Like I felt like, wow, like it has no power over me. And that was very meaningful to me because so much of my time with alcohol, I just wanted to throw myself into it. And so that was such a contrast. And I was able to go on to like, you know, I could have like one drink now and it's not like I want to get drunk again. And I don't know if I was a real bona fide alcoholic back then when I was a young adult, but whatever it was, like I was definitely on a trajectory of like, that was a pattern of behavior for me, a very strong pattern. And I'm just so thankful that I got out of it. As time went on in my life, you know, I've seen how destructive alcohol has been to people who I really care about. There are people today who they can't get out of it and they're very dependent on it, and it's ruined so many parts of their life. I early on after becoming a Christian, I visited a friend of mine who had been in a drunk driving accident, and I saw her head all stitched up, and she went to jail for being involved in that because someone had died. And over time, I just got this sense of like, wow, like I don't understand why I was so spared, because I had been her passenger before. I had done those same things, and yet I didn't suffer, or I didn't hurt people as much as I could have. And I just praise God for that. God was very kind to me even when I wasn't looking to change my life when I met Jeff and his friends. Like I truly feel like it was one of those times where like that there's a story in the Bible where someone's friends tear a hole through the roof and they lower their friend down to Jesus to get healed by Jesus. And so obviously, maybe in this story, the guy actually wanted to get healed, but you know, it was the friends who brought him to Christ. And I just thought, wow, like I think people's prayers were what really changed things for me and changed my heart. And I just wanted to add, like, Jeff often felt so bad in his witnessing attempts to me because it didn't feel like it was going anywhere. But I do think him being a good example and praying, that's what helped me. And so just as an encouragement for you, like if you have somebody who you want to see change and none of your words are doing anything, and I believe in the power of words, I believe in sharing the truth, but like your prayers could be what helps draw them to God. Your prayers can be what opens up their mind and heart to God. So just to not give up about that. And also I'd like to add, like, you don't have to be cool or act like what they're doing is cool if they're doing wrong things. Like just be yourself, and that can be a powerful testimony. I don't think you have to get involved with evil things to help people who are involved in evil things. Like, I don't think you do. I think God could use you and do a work despite you not having that ability to relate to them. You know, just be a loving person. And I'm grateful for the people who love me. There were like other things too that I saw over the years where I had this sense of like, wow, like God really spared me from, like I said, like hurting myself or hurting others. I later, attended, I attended a funeral of a good friend who died of an overdose, and I had other people in my life die of overdoses who, I just kept going down that same track. Somebody who was in our wedding, like he went to jail for a drug interaction a drug deal gone wrong. And I've sat with women who were behaving in the same, like similar ways to me in regards to sexual immorality. But unlike me, they became pregnant and they ended up ending their child's life. And they had so much grief about it and so much, it really messed them up. And even when they had a sense like God forgave them, it still just tore at their heart. And I mean, the only reason I don't have that same pain is just I didn't happen to get pregnant. And because in my mindset, knowing where I was at the time, that decision is probably the same one I would have made. I probably would have ended my child's life too. And so I've just seen all these things, and I don't know, again, why I was spared or saved from some consequences, but it's very real. Like, I just see how destructive these behaviors are, and like how they are, like, it's like Satan's playground. And so if you're a young person who hasn't done these things, I just encourage you not to, because you don't know if you're going to get spared. You don't know if you're going to be quote unquote lucky. And you don't know if you're going to be somebody who gets addicted or hurts so many people and damages so many lives based on these things. So I would just stay away from those sins as much as possible. And so just briefly to sketch out, like, after I became a Christian, Jeff and I dated for about 6 months. He felt led to dump me, though, after that 6 months, because he felt like God was telling him not to date me anymore. And he listened to that eventually. And I think that was really good for me. It was sad. I mean, I was sad, but I started to turn to the Bible to get comfort. I read the Psalms, and that was one of the first times Psalms was pretty comforting to me. And also, I think it was good for me to not be so tied to him as part of my faith. We were still very good friends, and I ended up going to UC Berkeley after I graduated with my associate's degree. I ended up going to one of those big, fat, fancy schools, I guess. And I was an art major at first, but then I quickly became disinterested in that, and I took religious studies classes. The humanities department seemed a lot more challenging and robust than the art department, and I really enjoyed my time being a Christian there. A lot of people think that, I mean, man, maybe it is hard to be a Christian there, but in my experience, because the Christians were in a minority position, like, when we met each other, it was exciting. Like, we were glad to find other Christians, and I quickly got involved with campus groups and ministries, and I just loved it. Fairly quickly, I knew many positive Christian people who wanted me to do well, and that was a great time. I had this desire to, like, witness and use art to witness, or just later just talking with people. And some of my most meaningful times there were when I felt like led to do something or help or say something, and there was a positive outcome. Like, it was so gratifying for me, and obviously, like, much more fulfilling and interesting than when I was just trying to entertain myself, like, much more meaningful and moving. And so that was great for me. Like, looking back, I wouldn't witness in the same way I did. And back then, I do think I got distracted by, like, arguments at times, but it was just a good period of growth, and one where I really started to love the church and have more of a set, like, get more into, like, a new identity as a Christian. Because for me, when I first became a Christian, I did feel like an extreme loss of my identity, and it was very hard because so much of my identity was tied into, like, raunchy behavior or drug and alcohol use or being crazy. And so there were times right initially after I became a Christian where, like, I felt so weird, like I didn't know how to act, like how to just be sober day after day, or like not using profanity regularly was a little difficult, and it was like I didn't know what to replace that with. But then over time, God really did, I think, change my heart and change my mind, like, internally. And over the years, that was really great to see. And I feel like all that secular dark media, TV, movies, all the profanity that I had taken in a way, I think it kind of brainwashed me, or just messed up my conscience a little bit. And then to get that back through degrees over the years, where I did feel like purified and also resensitized to things, like things started to not feel right. And so that was amazing to see, where I did start to embrace chastity and just those values, and other things too, like things that used to make me laugh, like would make me feel sad. Like it was on an internal level. And during my senior year of college, Jeff came up to Berkeley on Valentine's Day weekend as a surprise. I thought my friends were coming up, and he had planned this whole elaborate date. And so I guess unbeknownst to me, when he would pray about pursuing a relationship with me in the past, like he would just feel like a no. And then one day, like he stopped getting that no, and he just felt like it was okay. And so then he pursued, a relationship with me. And so with this big long date he took me on, where he took me to all of these places and it was all planned out, I thought, okay, well, he's either going to ask me to be his girlfriend again, or he's going to ask me to marry me, because like this is a really nice date that he's doing. And I was okay with either situation. I was okay with it. And so at the end of that day, he did propose to me, and I said yes. And so I went from school. It was funny because for some people, like I went from, obviously having no boyfriend to them being engaged very quickly. And so they're like, what happened, Dana? Like you didn't even have a boyfriend. But it was good. I knew him really well by that time. And I mean, I had gone on a couple of dates before, in between, after our breakup, but nothing. I was always interested in him. And so I think, well, okay. And then we got married a year later, and we went on, we had these plans that I was going to get my teaching credential and he was going to finish his bachelor's. And then we were going to have two incomes. I was going to save up my income once he was working. And then we would buy a house cash or close to cash. And then we'd have children and I'd stay home with them because I wanted to be a housewife. But like after we got married, we didn't really do much to make that plan happen. And I don't know why. He had been told by a doctor that he might be infertile before he got married. So maybe that was in his mind a little bit. I don't know. But instead of the plan that we had, though, we got married. And then 5 weeks later, I became pregnant with our first child, which was a surprise. And I dropped out of my credential program on the first day because I had taken my pregnancy test there because I felt a little funny. And I just thought, well, I want to stay home. Like, what's the point of doing my program? Like, I'm not even going to finish before my baby's born. And so I worked as a substitute teacher, and we had our first daughter. And then I went on to have this marathon of being pregnant, nursing for almost 20 years. We have 9 living children, and I ended up after that having 2 miscarriages. And so it's been a big, busy life. And there have been a lot of lessons learned over that time and other challenges that I think God brought me through. And I mean, there's so many though. I've been married now 23 years. And so it's like, well, how do you even talk about that? How do I even talk about all of that? Like, there's no real way. But just to keep things brief, I did want to touch on like maybe just 2 things that I think that God helped me a lot in. And one of them was after we got married, Jeff and I, had been so excited about having a faith-based life and trying to be Christians and reach out to people for Jesus and all that. But a few years after we were married, Jeff started listening to teachings by Leonard Ravenhill, and a lot of those teachings are good, but I mean, he did really take to heart about like fasting and praying and seeking the presence of God. And so that's what he did. And he had this really amazing experience with God where he felt like he was in the presence of God and he was weeping and just so moved and had this amazing time. And so after that, he thought, I want to do that again. Like, that was amazing. And he pursued something like that again. But the second time, the experience was very negative, and the things he felt he knew weren't real, shouldn't be real. And so that led him on this crushing spiral of doubt, where he just thought, well, if it's just in my brain. So if my brain can do this to me, like, everything I thought was from God's probably just in my brain. And so that led him to like a prolonged, years long period of like agnosticism. I guess he'd say he was atheist, but he was willing to consider there could be something. And so for me, this was devastating, because I had married a Christian, and I had married someone who was the leader in faith. And so to think like, okay, like, so you don't believe anymore. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I can't lead. Like, I was so used to him being the strong person. And so not having that was so hard, because that wasn't the person I married. That wasn't the life I wanted. And it was so disappointing. And we would talk about so many things, but it was so hard for me because I didn't want to hear about his doubts. And he was still willing to go to church. And so I went to church once without him, because he didn't want to go to like every church, and he didn't like the one that we were going to. He thought the teaching was really off. And so while I could see what he was saying, I still thought, well, I mean, it's good enough. And like, I have friends here and I'm comfortable here. And so I tried to go once without him. He just stayed home, and that just felt so bad. I went with the children. I think we had 3 children at the time. And that felt so bad that I thought, okay, I'll go wherever he wants to go, I guess. And so I'm going to be brief, but I think God really used that willingness to submit to what he wanted to do, and my willingness to try to keep our family together. That was used for the good. We went to a church for a while where we never joined. They had some they had some doctrines that I think were really wrong. But my husband didn't agree either. He didn't really even believe, but he respected how serious and zealous they were, and the degree of holiness that they had. We hadn't seen that anywhere else. They were, they look like they're Amish, but they're not, but like very modest. And just like, the degree to which they were lining up their lives in practical ways to the Bible, I hadn't seen that before. It seemed very different to me, but like, I could see where they were coming from. And, we were there in certain areas, but like, they took it further. And I just thought, wow, like it was good for me to be around that, even though I didn't believe in some of their major problematic doctrines. And that altogether was good from the family. And being there, because that's where Jeff was willing to go, like that gave me a taste for what I wanted. Like I wanted a church like that, but not with all the extra, like, it created a desire in me for something like that. It seemed like a really good, there was so much good in that. And I wanted that, especially in raising children. But then we went to another church that was helping, again, Jeff kind of process things because he could kind of check out of the way. Anyway, but I was willing to go with him from place to place. And eventually he did come back to faith, like through this math class that he took. And it was in a master's math degree program, which I did not want him to take. I tried to get him to not do it, but eventually I just tried to stop fighting about it. And so maybe that wasn't great, submitting to leadership, but I tried to not make it a fight. And through that program, eventually he did embrace the foundation for faith again. And then through some other things, he ended up praying again. I think it took him like 9 years or something to pray to God again. He did that with some friends that we had met in another church. That church wouldn't have been the place I would have picked, but I went there because he was willing to go there. And those are the first people who he prayed with again. And it was very emotional for him. And then during that whole time where he was doubting and all that, I was trying to learn. That church that was very holy and godly had made this impression on me. And I kept thinking like, I want to find something like that. And so I kept reading online and researching and looking into different things. And so what was really special and where we're at now is like when he did come back to faith, by that time I had discovered like the Anabaptists, and I had realized that a lot of the things I thought were kind of exclusive to that church we had visited, and that was the Church of God Restoration. That was the place we had visited. But I realized that, okay, that's not the only church that believes some of these things. Some of the things I thought were really good. Those are like Anabaptist beliefs. And so I started listening to things online and learning more about that and reaching out to people who believed somewhere in that camp. And so what was special is when Jeff finally came back to believing, I had discovered these other approaches to Christianity that we hadn't seen really before, because a lot of the churches around us, the conservative churches, they'd be more like evangelical, really focusing on justification by faith alone, just focusing on the cross and not so much about how you apply that. And if you do start to talk about those things, you get accused of being legalistic and not understanding the gospel properly. So with these online teachers, I had so much encouragement because they were teaching really good things. And so I remember this one night I was playing a sermon by Finney Caravella, and it was about when the passage where Jesus says, your righteousness needs to exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees. So often that is taught like in a different way in the churches that we had been around, where they would say, yeah, Jesus is really teaching that you need to stop trying to be righteous on your own. You need to just believe in the cross and what he did on the cross. And that's what he's talking about. And Finney's view was more like, no, Jesus really meant like your righteousness needs to exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees, that because of what he teaches on the Sermon on the Mount, it's not just the externals, it's the internals. And it's like this higher call than what Moses taught. And so he's saying, yes, Jesus really meant that. And so Jeff had listened to that sermon while I was listening. And at the end of that, he said, wow, like, I don't disagree with anything in that. Like, that was a really good sermon. And so that was great, because so often he had found these holes in different sermons. I mean, that's why he didn't like that first church that I had wanted to stay at. And I think Jeff was right. I think he was seeing truth, but like it's just been so great to now be where we're at together after all this time, like on the same page, and then finding groups that we can really feel part of and be aligned with. It's really been a blessing. There are other things I could talk about, but I think I'm just going to end it right there. I'll probably do some other videos because, yeah, there's more that I could say, but I just want to end with, I praise God because I feel like he gave me such a new life, such a fulfilling life. And seeing how he's cleansed my mind from some of the filthy or the demonic things that I was bringing into my life, I just praise God. And I also hope this is an encouragement for you to just never stop praying for people in your life who seem like they don't care about God, because maybe they don't, but you can keep praying for them. And also I am amazed that he's given me such a new identity in him. Now I've had several times where over the years recently where, people walk up to me like at the park, and if I chat with them a little, like one of the first questions they ask is, okay, so what church do you go to? And, or call me sister, or like if they start cursing, they apologize to me. And I don't think I'm giving them a dirty look or anything like that. I think I've just been so much taken over from dark to light, and sometimes people are surprised that, I used to use those same words. I mean, I don't even make a point of talking about that, but, it's just that I've been brought so far from the path I was on. And that's not always inevitable, because I see a lot of people who don't leave that path, and then things just get worse and worse and more destructive. And so I just, again, praise God for helping me be, a faithful wife, not addicted, and oriented towards trying to be a helpful part of his kingdom. So if you could just pray for me that I would continue on in that, I'd appreciate it. And God bless your night. Or God bless your day. God bless you.